There's nothing especially funny about the dementia that often accompanies old age, but I've known several people who approached it with uncommonly good humor, at least. One of our city's matriarchs, Marion Hoblet, was one of my parishioners 25 years ago who would show up for church in her stretch Lincoln, usually with fresh, dense, and different colored chips of paint on all four corners of her huge car. She announced one day, "I feel just like Christopher Columbus. Every time I leave home, I have no idea where I'm going or how I'm going to get there, and when I get home, I can't remember where I've been." I thought at that time it's not that much different from the rest of us. As Yoda told Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, "Difficult to see, always in motion, the future." That was bad, I'm sorry. The future's hard to see. Søren Kierkegaard said that we live our lives like a ship that is forced to leave harbor with sealed orders. It's not until you're out in the middle of it that you even get to find out where you're supposed to go. We don't know how things are going to turn out. You remember the original prologue to the old TV show, Star Trek, Space, the Final Frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Now that sounds kind of kitschy to our ears, but it actually wasn't something written by Gene Roddenberry. It was adapted from a 1958 White House pamphlet that was encouraging young people to be interested in space exploration. Ironically, though, those of you who are Star Trek fans, and David's written songs for Star Trek productions, so you may be the biggest fan in the room, but the prologue had almost nothing to do with the actual episodes in the sci-fi TV series. None of us ever know where we're really going to go when we launch into the future, and yet the prologue it's a hopeful statement. It anticipates that the future holds new experiences that we haven't had before. It expects to find new life forms and new civilizations. Of course, in the TV series, they did encounter new civilizations and managed to engage in armed conflict with almost all of them. But at least initially, from the White House pamphlet promoting interest in NASA to our own early interest in sci-fi, space has always been for our generation the equivalent of looking beyond the horizon for Magellan or Columbus. We would love to be Darwin on that first visit to the Galapagos Islands, finding new forms of life and exploring aspects of our existence that we didn't know existed. When my daughter was very little, the movie Titanic captured her imagination. And so when I heard that Robert Ballard, the guy who found the sunken Titanic, was going to be giving a lecture in Springfield, I took her out of school, took her to hear him, but he hardly mentioned the fact that he had found the Titanic. Ballard talked to us about the Black Sea, what was 5,000 years ago a freshwater lake that was surrounded by villages full of fishing boats. It may have been the site that inspired the flood narrative in the Gilgamesh epic and our own Genesis story about Noah. It's possible that the earthen barrier that separated that freshwater lake from the Mediterranean just collapsed all at once, burying all of those towns and people in a flood that never ever receded. So Ballard's telling us that there are more historical finds on the bottom of the Black Sea than there are in all of the museums in the whole world, just waiting to be discovered. And I looked over and saw my daughter's 8-year-old eyes just lighting up at the prospect of discovering virtual lost worlds from before history began to be written. But I found it fascinating that a man who could have been boasting about how he found the Titanic was no longer interested in what he had done before. last year, the year before. He was obsessed with what might come in the next year, and the year after that. Could we look at 2019 without the burden of what has broken our hearts in 2016, in 2017, and 2018? Could we look at it as if we were going to discover something brand new? Of course, the turning of a page of a calendar means next to nothing. The assignments of names to months and days and numbers to years does not actually affect anything, but what does make a difference is how much of your mind, how much of your cognition, how much of the space in your skull is already taken up with junk from the past. How much space is there for you to hold on to the hope that you're going to discover new things, new civilizations, discover things that have been long hidden from sight, rather than just reliving the stuff that's already happened? Now, I talk in prayers and sermons about setting aside your resentments, about leaving the past behind, about raising the rent on negative thoughts so they can't afford to stay in your skull. It's a lot easier to say than it is to do. In fact, a lot of the psychological attraction to gambling, which has in our lifetime spread from just a couple of locations in the United States to everywhere, a lot of the attraction to it psychologically is that it pulls you out of your ruminations about the past into a present moment. When the cards are being dealt, you don't have time to worry about the broken heart you got 10 years ago, or the election that your side lost 2 years ago, or even the outcome of the last hand. In the flurry of the game, you're only thinking about the next card to be turned up. And that turns out to be a huge psychological relief to stop feeling in your gut, in your lower back, all the crap that's happened to you in past years and months. We tend to obsess about past failures, insults, love relationships that fall apart. You will lie sleeplessly on your bed, replaying painful incidents in your memory over and over again. I've only been to Las Vegas once, but I remember walking into this huge casino, all the lights and bells and noises and all those people who looked hypnotized, just staring into the flashing lights of slot machines. And I wondered in that moment, what are all these people trying to forget? What are they trying not to think about? Now, I personally often use sci-fi and fantasy movies in just that sort of way, as an escape. When I find my mind stuck on some past hurt, some friendship that I really relied on that fell apart, some cruel insult, I'll just drop out and go see a movie that distracts me from me when I need for me to be quiet and just let myself go into another universe. I don't want to let my past take ownership of my future. But your past is always there, like a cloud of unhappy memories that could just fill your head and keep you from ever risking a new love relationship, a new friendship. Heck, guys, I know you. Some of you have never even tried sushi because you're afraid you won't like it. I love the quote from John Shedd that observes that a ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what we build ships for. Many of you have gone back to your hometown to attend a class reunion, and you know there's very few things that are as sad as encountering someone you really liked in high school but who never left home, who stayed right where they grew up. They kept their ship of life tied to the dock, never venturing out into the bigger world. It is as if they were perpetually in high school, undisturbed by a new thought or a new experience. There are exceptions to that, of course. I just can't think of any. Now, I thought my world had come to an end 25 years ago when my marriage abruptly fell apart. Again, I thought that the meaningful part of my adult life was over 11 years ago when I was forced to resign from the denominational church where I had built my career. I have at times lost friendships that have made me promise myself that I would never, ever, ever trust anyone ever again. The past can make a horrible roommate inside your skull. The things that can make us check out of the future are not even always personal. I bet everyone here has heard something on the news in the past 2 years that made you say to yourself, that's it. I'm not watching the news anymore. I'm not going to care anymore. I'm not even going to try anymore. Now, my drug of choice when Donald Trump just pushes the limits of American constitutional democracy or just basic moral decency is to watch recordings of shows about life on Caribbean islands. When it seems like America is just too broke to go on believing that it can be fixed, I dream of moving to an island, growing vegetables, and scuba diving every day. And that very thing might happen someday. Don't be surprised when it does. It just needs to not happen right now, because that man is not going to beat me. I am not going to give up on this country just because of him. Now, I don't blame anyone for taking a vacation from the news. I don't blame anyone for taking a vacation from family. You've just made it through Thanksgiving and Christmas. I feel you. I don't even blame people that have to take a break from church. Church is sometimes just that emotional drill that you've just got to have some relief from. Sometimes we take a vacation from America. But the reason we go on vacation is to get refreshed so that we can come back and hit it again and try a little bit harder. You know, a year ago this past summer, I was down in Florida. I was speaking in a Unitarian church in Sarasota, and I got a phone call to tell me that my good friend Dan Goodwin was in the hospital. He had a heart attack, and I was horrified at the thought that maybe Dan was in mortal danger, and I wanted to try to get to a plane and get back home, but like a true Ozarker, Dan just stood up out of his bed in the ICU unit, walked out to the parking lot, and drove himself home. But for a little while, I thought maybe Dan was in big trouble. But then a year later, without any warning, he just falls in love and a few weeks later announces his wedding plans. Yeah. 1 year after having stents put in his heart so he wouldn't die, Dan starts acting like a teenager whose greatest health risk is terminal acne because he's gone back to high school on us while we weren't paying attention. Now, in 2017, you never would have guessed what would have happened in 2018. So aren't you glad you just hung around to see how that was going to turn out? We don't know what 2019 holds in store for any of us. We can be pretty sure that Trump is going to say or do something that's even more stupid than what he said and did in 2018. Don't tell yourself it's not possible. Don't dash your own hearts on the rocks over that one. It's possible. But we have reason to expect that Bob Mueller is going to issue his investigations report sometimes in the next couple of months. And even if he doesn't, spring's going to come, and maybe there'll be an impeachment trial in the Senate, and even if there's not, there'll be strawberries again. If you allow yourself to venture out again, there are strange new worlds to be discovered, new civilizations, new love, new friendships, and the potential for a better world. My friend, Dr. Nicole Fisk, brought this Tennyson poem to my attention. You may think that getting advanced degrees in English is not worth anything, but to me, it's nice to have an English professor in my inner circle. But it's a bit disarming to have a British poet write a poem 150 years ago that sounds like something that we needed to write this week. But hear it as the transition from 2018 to 2019. Ring out the old, ring in the new, ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind for those that we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life, the sweeter manners, the purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride and place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 years of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land, and ring in the Christ that is to be. Folks, in 2019, we are not in the throes of slavery with naked Africans being auctioned off on the city square. We're not in the midst of a civil war that will claim the lives of 1 out of every 40 people living in America. We're not fighting a world war. We're not fighting an epidemic. We are living through a dark chapter in American history. But let's be realistic. It's not the worst. It's not the darkest. We've solved bigger problems. We've endured greater challenges. This is not the end of democracy. Trump will not bring social progress to an end. He, of course, will not make America great again, but he has made Saturday Night Live great again. And I'm grateful for that. I don't want to make a habit out of quoting Woody Allen, but I think that he was onto something when he said that 80% of success in life is just showing up. You have to keep your game piece on the board. You have to stay in the game. You can retreat for a moment, take in a movie, yell back at the TV news, then get up and give 2019 a chance, because I'm convinced that we can make it better than 2018.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.